Good morning, and today you join me down at Albans Lakes. Now this is actually a complex of lakes which I've fished a fair bit in the past, and over the next couple of nights hopefully we're going to be able to catch a couple of the residents in here. Now to kickstart this session I'm going to be fishing on Willow Lake. Now I've took a little walk around, and as expected with the spring sunshine out I found a lot of the fish in the outer bounds. Now obviously I'm not allowed to fish in there, however peg 53, which is sort of on the corner of this bit, gives me great access to fishing the entry of that north fishing bank, and it also gives me great access out into the middle. I am quite confident we're going to catch a few fish, and if we don't get through to any of the big ones I'm going to be moving onto farm. Anyway, enough of me talking, time to get the gear unloaded, and I can't wait to get the rods out. On any lake, outer bounds are an area where carp love to spend their time. I know that they just fish at the end of the day, but trust me, carp are clever and they know where they're safe and where they're not going to get caught. Now, down here on Willows Lake, there is an area around an acre in size where no one's able to cast. There's a rope going across the water, avoiding people casting in there. And yeah, a lot of the time, and especially throughout the full year, the carp can be found in there. Now, peg 53, the peg that I've been fishing on this session, it gives you great access to fishing the mouth of this bay. If I've spoke to a few people, they haven't really been catching anything, or I haven't seen fish elsewhere in the lake, I'd certainly focus my efforts on trying to get close to that outer bounds, as there'll always be a few fish in and around that area. The rods are finally out in the swim. Now, it took a little bit longer than I was wanting it to, but I wanted to make sure them rods were out there perfect, filling me with confidence. What I've decided to do, I haven't put all my eggs into one basket. I've decided to pick two different spots, and there's a couple of different reasons why. Now, I mentioned earlier there's stacks of fish holding up in the outer bounds, and I just feel like as the sun starts to set, them fish are going to venture out, so I've decided to put one rod on the entrance of that bay, and I am confident that's going to be the rod that's going to have the most bites. Now, with the other two rods, I've decided to pick a nice spot, 18 wraps, aiming out towards the pylon in front of the swim. It's a little bit deeper out there, feels quite soft on the bottom, and I've decided to put two rods out there, as I can just imagine when it's dark, the fish are going to be swimming around that area and I'll be able to pick a few bites. Over the top, I've introduced 12 to 15 dot spods, a bit of a mix between hemp, sweet corn, 12mm boilies, a bit of a grubbing around mix. So yeah, that's going to be the game plan going into this first evening over here. Hopefully we'll catch a few, and then tomorrow I might change a few things or possibly even move lakes. Well, it was about 5 minutes ago since I said I was feeling pretty optimistic for the evening. And yeah, the rod just near the outer bounds. Now a few bleeps pulled up tight and they're in. I'm going to give myself £30 for this one. Yes, it's not going to break any records, but it is the first bite of the session, and although it is slightly smaller than what I was expecting, I'm still over the moon. So I'm going to put this little chap back and see how many more we can catch. And you never know, something a little bit bigger might be out there waiting for us. Just put that carp back, and I thought I'd take this quick opportunity to run through the rig which I'm using. Now I've decided to put all the rods out on the same rig, and the reason for this is out there the bottom is fairly clean, there's not really that much weight out there. In areas it's hard, in other areas it's a little bit soft. However, I feel like this rig, which is the D rig, will present anywhere where I cast it. So that's the reason why I'm using this rig. Now as for hook bait itself, the hook bait which I caught that carp on was this double piece of yellow sweet corn. Now, the mix that I'm introducing, it's Scopex squid boilies, hemp, sweet corn, and I just felt like I wanted a hook bait that would match the mix that I'm putting out there. Now, on the other rod, I'm putting a Scopex squid wafter topped off with a bit of yellow sweet corn, again, matching the mix. However, on the third rod, I've decided to put a 12mm citrus wafter. I feel like the pink will just stand out against the mix, and you never know, some carp might prefer that hook bait over a match for hatch. there we go, fish number 2 before it's dark. Now, that was again on the rod down the margin. The take was crazy. It certainly pulled back a lot harder compared to that first one. Now, I might be catching on this rod because there's a lot of fish down in the out of bounds and there's not that many fish out in open water at the moment. However, I might be catching on that rod because it's a double yellow hook bait. So I'm going to reel in one of them rods now, swap it over as it's something that I can't ignore, and you never know, it might just bring them bites a little bit quicker. But fish number 2 and hopefully not the last. Well, they're slowly getting bigger, a little bit bigger than the last one, but it shows that the tactics are working, and I'm sure if I stick at it, one of them big ones won't be too far away. A lot of people who fish down here choose to use boilies. Now, when they're introducing this bait into the swim, they're using either a throwing stick or a catapult. Now, these are 2 great methods, but one disadvantage is you're getting a large spread of bait. Yes, it's going to hold fish in the area, but I find when you use these 2 items, it can sort of prolong the period between biting the next one. However, using the dot spot and being nice and tight, I'm getting loads of carp in a nice tight area, and when I'm getting the rigs out there, I'm getting the bites super quick and a lot faster if I was using a catapult or a throwing stick. This is certainly something I'd consider if you're coming down here to Willows, just doing something a little bit different compared to the angler next to you. I've lost the light pretty quick. I was just about to get that fish out, and in between the time of landing that fish and now where I'm playing another one, I actually lost a fish on this rod, again just before I was getting that first fish out, but I wanted to maximise on this feeding spell. I got them spods out probably about 25 minutes ago, and yeah, the fish out in the middle of the lake, as expected, have turned up on the bait. So the one in there is probably the biggest fish of the session so far, a proper nice mirror. Yeah, this one doesn't feel too bad either. And one's just showing of a margin spot, so it's all kicking off down here. It is going to be a very productive night by the looks of it. But yeah, absolutely loving the bait. That's 3 bites in the last 15 minutes. Yes, I did lose one, but we've got 2 mirrors in the net. So I think the best thing now to do is get these fish sorted, get a bit more bait out there and see how many we can catch. And there we have it, the biggest fish of the session so far, and I'm going to say it's the best looking one. After putting them few spods out on the longer spot just before dark, the fish have certainly responded to it. There's plenty of fish showing out there. I'm getting a few liners. I've caught this one, I've got another one in the net. I did drop one, but yeah, I'm absolutely loving this session down here, and I'm sure the action is going to continue long into the night. When fishing willows, I like to be super organised and prepared. I make sure to bring plenty of bait down here. I don't bring it all down to the swim, I'll leave plenty in the van, but there's a lot of carp in here, and if they turn up on you, you can quite easily go through 5-10 kilos of bait in no time at all, and having spare bait in the van as backup is really important. One other thing that I'll make sure to do is have plenty of spare rigs tied, have a few of them baited up, waiting to go, because when them fish turn up on you, as we've seen in this session, you can catch 2 or 3 in 10 or 15 minutes. And when it's like that, you want to maximise the time on the bank and get your rod straight back out there. And just being a little bit more organised than other people will help get that rod out and possibly result in an extra bite or 2. For this Fishery in Focus, you join me down on the Albans Lakes complex. This is a set of 3 lakes just outside of St Albans near the M25 in Hertfordshire. As mentioned, there's 3 lakes on the complex, 1 match lake, 1 sort of runs water which is Willows, which is the lake we've been fishing on, and a harder lake known as Farm. On the complex itself, there's an on-site tackle shop, toilet facilities and great access, allowing you to drive around to the majority of swims on the complex. The lake that we've been fishing on this session is Willows Lake. Willows Lake itself is 22 acres in size with 60 swims located around the bank. Average depths are around 3 to 12 foot depending on which end of the lake you're fishing, and there's 1 main island down the bottom end. The first peg which I'm going to talk about is peg 1. Peg 1 is the first peg that you'll come across on the Match Lake bank. This peg commands a large area of shallow water which is sheltered by the island. This area of the lake is great in spring and summer, or if the wind's pushing down into this bank, and you can have really big hit sessions in this area. As you move down this bank, you then come across pegs 3, 4 and 5. In front of these pegs, there's a nice shallow area next to the island, but as you move further out into the lake, more towards the central body of water, there's a second shelf underwater moving into much deeper water. This can be a great area, again, if the fish are sort of holding up in that middle zone down this end of the lake. As you carry on moving down this bank anti-clockwise around the lake, you then come across pegs 8, 9 and 10. Now me personally, peg 9, which is out on the end of a spit, this is one of my favourite pegs on the lake. The reason for this is there's 60 pegs on the lake, and at weekends especially it can get quite busy. And this tends to be an area where the fish feel safe, out in the middle, underneath the pylons, and again it's a great area where you can get plenty of bites. Again, moving further down the bank, you then enter what I like to call the deeper section of the lake. This end of the lake compared to the shallower end, to be honest, there's a lot less bays and features, which means the dominant tactic down here tends to be open water fishing. When I'm fishing on this bank, the area that I like to target is around pegs 21 to 23. And the reason for this, as just mentioned, it gives you great access to the central bowl of this end of the lake. Down this end of the lake, the average depths are a lot deeper, of around 10 to 12 foot. At the end of this bank, just before you come across the farm lake, you're met with pegs 29 and 30. These two pegs are completely different compared to the rest of the pegs in this section of lake, because you've got a margin down to your left and right to fish up against. Again, just like peg 1, when the wind's hacking down the length of the lake into this bank, you can catch plenty of carp at close quarters. We're now on the road side of the lake, and pegs 31 to 45, again similar to the far bank, but aren't really that many physical features to aim towards, and it's all about open water fishing. This area of the lake also has great access, as there's a road going behind the majority of the swims. This is great if you're someone who wants to turn up to the lake and get fishing straight away. Moving further around the lake, you move back into the shallow end of the lake. Now, one thing that I'm going to mention quickly is between the shallow end of the lake and the deep end, you've got a spit and a small channel which separates the two bodies of water. Now, me personally, this is an area that I try to avoid. Most people would fish here thinking that they're going to intercept the carp as we move from A to B. But me personally, I've just found that the fish don't really hold there, and it can be a bit of a waste of time. I'm not saying avoid it completely, but this is certainly something to take into consideration. One area of the lake that you just can't ignore is the outer bounds. This is an area where the fish feel safe with being seeing them in there on this session, and I think at any time of the year there's going to be a few carp in that area. The two pegs which give you the greatest access to fishing close to these carp are pegs 52 and 53, which is the peg that we've been fishing on this session. Now, out of these two pegs, my personal favourite is 53. The reason for this is, down your left hand side of the margin, you can get nice and tight up against the outer bounds rope, and also it gives you great access, again, out into the middle, which peg 9 also commands. There are a few of my favourite pegs on the lake, but to be honest, pretty much every single peg on the lake will produce carp. There's a good stock of carp in here, ranging from low doubles up to £30, and if you're someone who's wanting to get a bend in the rod, Albans Lake is certainly a venue that I'd be checking out. After yesterday's little flurry of action, I was pretty confident that it was going to be an action-packed night, and for some reason it wasn't. I popped up this spot probably around 20 minutes ago, and straight away the rods went. So I feel like it's really key when fishing this lake to keep introducing the bait. As Ben fished yesterday, although I was topping up the spot, there clearly wasn't bait out there, and I feel like that's why I didn't catch through the night. So I'll concentrate on getting this one in, get more bait out, and try and get a bit of a hit together. But this weather, it can do one, because it is disgusting. Well, you joined me about 10 minutes later. I got that rod back out on the spot. As I mentioned earlier, I feel like baiting up is definitely key. Put a few spods over the top, and yet we are into another carp. And there we have it, the first fish of the two this morning. I've got another one in the net, a beautiful scaly mirror, and this one here, which was the larger of the two, a wonderful common. Anyway, the weather today, I'm not gonna lie, it looks pretty good for fishing, but for me being out here, and more importantly, the camera's out in the rain, it's not ideal, but if we're catching fish, I'm more than happy. I'm so wishing I made the most of the sun yesterday. Yesterday it was lovely and warm, sun was out, I was even getting a cheeky suntan. But today, yeah, all I'm getting is a cold. It is pretty cold, wet, wind is blowing straight into my face, but the margin rod is just ripped off yet again. These fishing here certainly know how to pull back. Blimey. Get in the net, bit better. Oh. Now that one's in the net, gonna get a run hooked and jump straight back in the bivvy. It certainly feels nice to be holding a carp, especially now that it's stopped raining. We've got a little break in the weather, so what I'm gonna do is put the fish back and then I'll run through the bait and the way that I've been applying it into the swim. That one was bang on for money. Now, I've mentioned it a few times on this session, but introducing bait has been really key when fishing this lake, especially on this open water spot. Now, the reason I feel like it's important is out there, it's pretty flat, a little bit soft, a little bit harder in areas, but there aren't really that many features, so you're making the bait the feature. Now, there's a lot of fish in here, and I'm sure over the years, they've seen plenty of spods and spoms going in here. And when they hear this entering the water, they know that food is getting introduced. So introducing 3 to 4 dot spods every half hour, 45 minutes is certainly helping keeping the bites coming. Now, when you're spodding, it's really important that you're using the correct hardware. It's no good using a fishing rod or just a spare rod. It's not going to do the job properly. So the rod that I'm using on this session is the 12-foot dot spod rod. It's a really powerful rod. It's probably around 5-6 pound test curve. But when you're casting one of these, the dot spod out there, loaded up with bait, it does weigh quite a lot and you need that extra backbone to get the spod out there. On the reel itself, I've got 25 pound spod braid. The reason I'm using the spod braid is it's a really low diameter, which just helps you hit the clip every single time. On here, I've got a 30 pound braided leader. To be honest, when you're fishing not that far out, I don't really feel like you need one, but it's just giving me confidence that I'm not going to be cracking one of these off and leaving them out in the lake. So that's the hardware that I've been using to introduce the bait. Anyway, I'm gonna get a few more dot spods out there and see if we can maybe get another bite or two. Here are my 3 top tips for when you're fishing down here on Willows Lake. My first top tip is make sure that you're introducing bait on the spot little and often. There's a lot of carp and a lot of bream in here, and I feel like there can be periods of time where you're not getting any bites, and it could be a simple case of them fish have came in and cleared your spot. Also, on this venue in particular where there's a high stock of carp, I feel like the constant smell of bait going down to the bottom, it can help draw carp in and get an extra bite or two. My second top tip is make sure you bring a set of distance sticks. It might sound a little bit silly, but down here with people using catapults and throwing sticks, being able to fish really accurately with the use of the dot spod, I feel like it's a much greater way of building up a hit of fish down here. So if you're coming down to Willows, make sure to bring them sticks and be super accurate. My third and final tip is if you sat there in the bivvy, not really doing anything and you're not catching anything, just tie a few spare rigs up, get them baited up and waiting to go. As we've seen on this session, when the fish turn up, the action can be pretty thick and fast. And when it's like that, you want to maximise that opportunity. So when you get the fish in the net, you get your new rig, clip it on, get the rod back out, and by doing that, it will allow you to get a few extra bites and turn a great session into a red letter session. And that is the end of our session down here on Willows Lake. It's been a really enjoyable session. It was going to be a little bit longer and we were going to move on one of the other lakes, but to be honest, I'm pretty satisfied with what we've caught over here. The weather, it's only going to get worse tonight, and the temptation of a nice hot shower and a bit of food is a little bit more tempting than sitting out here in the cold. But I hope you guys have learned a thing or two, so when you come down here, you're able to have a session just like we've had today.